Are we live? I think we are live. Let's hope so. Okay, hello everybody. It's been a while. It's Michael Simms here from MMA&B, and today we're delving into one of the most important conversations that not many people are having, and especially for parents, all parents, but parents with vulnerable children. We don't know what's going to happen when we die. What are they going to be left with? Who controls their money? So I've got Grant here. Um, don't know Grant. First time I've met Grant. He's supposed to be very talented and special in this
Oh,
area.
thank you, Michael. There you go. So you're trying to hit me up on the first date. So
Yeah.
perfect.
So introduce yourself, Grant. Tell us who you are.
Okay, so my background, I did economics law, worked for some big banks, big accounting firms, but way back in 1994, I started um, getting into self-managed super funds when they came around. So I saw there's a huge opportunity there for me, particularly with the amount of money in self-managed. So I've written 5 books on self-managed super funds. I established the SMSF Association, SMSF Members Association, and you can jump on my YouTube if you just go at Grant Abbott, and there's over 300 videos on self-managed superannuation funds. So, and look, there's still absolutely a very important tool for looking after your family. One of the most important things that probably, I know we're talking about families and stuff like that, but I think when I've talked to the guys that at Mary Jane at FFS, that a lot of the people are concerned about government, ATO overreach, and stuff like that. So when you're protecting your wealth, you actually do need to protect your wealth, not only from the people who ravage it at the time of death, but also during life, because if you've got nothing to give to your family and the estate, it really makes no difference. So, probably around about maybe, so self-managed super funds are great because no one can touch the money that's sitting in there, which is fantastic. They can change the taxes, but they can't. Your trustee in bankruptcy can't touch the money. The ATO can't, so it's good. But probably around about 7 or 8 years ago, my dad, and in my book, I think, look, I've got a couple of books. This is an old one. I've got a new one that's coming out. So that's Guru's Guide to Self-Managed Super Fund. But this one, you can get a copy from the guys at FFS. So that's Family Wealth Protection. So my dad hit me up, and I was married and had stepchildren at that time, and he was a bit shocked because he said, "Well, if mum and I pass away and you get the money, because you're a pretty clever, legal person. So and you pass away, where does it go to?" I said, "Well, at the moment, my will says it goes to my wife at the time, and she passes away. So what happens?" I said, "Well, oh God, it goes down to my stepchildren." And my dad was aghast, and he said, "Well, but I want to make sure it stays within the bloodline." And I think that most of the times we work hard for our wealth, and it's really important to put in place structures or even wills. Wills aren't very good, unfortunately, but to at least have some connectivity to make sure that it's your only bloodline, because you've got the ravages of family law. And the number of, I always use a story that my daughter's friend, 26-year-old, her grandmother did the right thing, gave her a a $2 million property down in Brighton, wasn't far from Warney's old place, and then her boyfriend of 4 years had been living with her, upped and left. He went and saw a family lawyer. She had to sell the house and give him $900,000, whereas it would have been so easy to build like a family protection trust and structure it completely differently. So one is we want to build our wealth, but it's not much good building your wealth if you're not protecting it.
Well, okay. What is asset protection?
I think there's a bit of difference. It's really sort of something that's bandied around by accountants and to a lesser extent lawyers. Lawyers don't really understand it. Lawyers are the first ones to put you in bankruptcy before you really should be. Asset protection is making sure your wealth or your assets are sitting in a vehicle where other people can't touch them, whether it's the tax office, whether it's your creditors, litigators. Currently, at the moment, Over 50% of all wills are challenged by adult children. For those people who live in New South Wales, ex-spouses, even if it was like 20, 30, 40 years ago, can make a challenge on the estate. Every state, if you've got stepchildren, they can, if you can't leave them out of the will because they're going to make a challenge. And even if you give them a lot of stuff in the will, they can still go to the court and say, well, that's not enough. And the problem is that then takes like 4 or 5 years of litigation. The only people that make money out of the whole deal is going to be the lawyers. It's a classic case over in West Australia, Miller and Taylor. And they didn't have a huge amount of money, $600,000 property. That's all he was left with, nothing else, because he was on the pension. This was 2013. He had a de facto, sort of popped in and out, but he wasn't a man of any means, but he just had this homestead. And then when he passed away, he gave everything to his two children, left her out. She made a claim on the estate, and it was upheld that she was going to get 40% of the 600,000. But it took 5 years. By the time they got to court, they'd already spent $520,000 in legal fees. So it's a lot easier. Asset protection is about making sure that whatever assets you have are protected from what we call the creditors and the predators.
And how do we do that?
Well, a number of things. Like I like to use what we call a family protection trust. So it's a vehicle that I devised and really hate to say it, but it's derived from the British royal family. The royal monarchy are very good at keeping their money safe and passing down from generation to generation. So succession planning is really important. If you want to keep it in your bloodline, theirs is fantastic because you've got a delineator that it's only the firstborn male and so on and so on go down there. So we need to have a line of succession for our family that goes down multi-generations. The next step from there is to ensure that we utilise the trust. Trust has been around since the 12th century in the UK. And the benefit of that is that beneficiaries, or the people who are going to be looked after in the trust, and that's going to be our bloodline, don't own any assets in the trust per se, so they can't be sued for the assets in the trust. So it's sort of held in this blind vehicle. From that is we have a trustee, and the trustee does the investment, the management, all that stuff. But sitting to the side is what we call the kings and the queens of the trust. And they're what we call the family protection appointors. So they really control it from behind the scenes. But again, if you've got, I see cases day in, day out. One of the biggest disasters in Australia, unfortunately, is that we're encouraged two things. One is to have properties in our own name. And when the properties are in our own name, it's exposed, because the first thing I'm going to do is if I'm coming to litigate you, so if I decide to litigate Michael, the first thing I'm going to do is do a land title search, and I'll see if you've got property. That's it, happy days for me, because I know that, if there's damages or there's fees, I'm gonna be right on the point there. The other one is a lot of Australians have been used to using or buying property with negative gearing, which is good. But the problem is that stays in your own name. You're far better, and probably haven't got time today, but if need be, have a chat with Mary Jane at FFS and she can send you a paper. But I've done a paper on why negative gearing inside a self-managed super fund is 10 times better than negative gearing in your own name. It's a lot more tax effective, 10 times more. Plus, you've also got asset protection as well. So the concept of the trust, and the beauty of it is because the trust, the way we set them up, doesn't die. It means that, if it's Grant and his partner and they both pass away, then it automatically goes down to the children. And I can have, for example, again, we do a lot of work with parents who've got mentally challenged children or disabled children. So you can come out of that, you can build a special disability trust, which has some fantastic tax and also social services or Centrelink consequences with it as well. So it's about asset protection, but it's more about also, you don't want to give money to your children directly ever, because if they get in a family law action, that money's gone. So it's much better to protect it within a vehicle. We call it a castle. So you want to have your castle and protected by a moat.
And what is estate planning? And do you need to wait until you're old to do that, or can younger people do that? Or
Yeah, no, look, a lot of our clients are probably, 25, 30, 35. Once you've got a family home. Estate planning is simply so I probably do it. There's two different ways. There's destructive estate planning and there's protective estate planning. So destructive estate planning is you go to a lawyer who's got no idea about asset protection because it doesn't make sense. For example, if you know that a stepchild is going to sue, why would I do a will, transfer all my assets into my estate when I die, only to know that it's going to be litigated? So, for example, in superannuation, I can pay directly down to my children, and then my stepchildren can't access it if I go directly. Likewise, if all my assets in the trust, it sits outside. So, estate planning through other vehicles with asset protection is much better than destructive estate planning. And I've seen lawyers. I look at them and I look at their wills, and they know that there's going to be a challenge to the estate, but they still go ahead. And you know why? And this might be conspiracy theory, but I can tell you why it is because they also act as the administrator of the estate. So if there's a challenge, guess what happens for them? If it goes for 2 or 3 years, they get paid fees on that.
now, what if you don't have much? Is it something to bother with if you don't have?
Well, no, look, if you don't have a huge amount, it's not worth it. But with all due respect, there's a case in Victoria Supreme Court. It was a $50,000 estate and went to the Supreme Court of Victoria. And one of the executors said, "Well, $50,000. This is ridiculous. Why should it go to court?" And then basically the court said, "Well, there's no de minimis rule. So, if you lodge an action, you lodge an action." So, look, even if if it's a small amount, it means it's probably unlikely to be litigated against. But the thing is, when we deal with families or blended families, quite often people don't care about the money. All they want to do is get revenge. And you've all everyone's probably seen that Succession movie, the Succession series and that. There's no more hatred than some children for their parents and stuff like that. And some of the things I see day in, day out, they're scary, and likewise with a lot of your viewers, even if you're older, you've got to make sure you've got a good enduring power of attorney, and it's used wisely. I've seen kids fleece their parents. Their parents and other kids miss out. I've seen children actually go to the Administrative Appeals Tribunal to try and take guardianship over their mum and dad. So that they're not even waiting for them to die. They're trying to take their money up front.
Now, what about assets? Now, I
Yep.
know everyone knows a car and a house is an asset, or
Crypto, stuff like that.
yeah,
Crypto
now
gold.
we're
Yep.
talking. I'm a collector, so I
Hmm.
collect autographs. A lot got
Yep.
stolen. One of them today is worth $70,000. I don't have.
Whose is that?
Pardon?
Whose autograph is worth
It
70,000?
was a very rare Michael Jordan signed
Oh
game
wow.
jersey
Oh
that I
wow.
bought for $700 20 years ago. Got stolen.
Yeah.
$70,000 if you want to buy it today. But the point is, I've gone to op shops and found some items similar that I
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
choose.
Fantastic.
And
Yep.
I assume family have died,
Yep.
and whoever cleaned the house out has just
Uh,
donated this stuff to the op shop, whether that's
Fantastic. Yeah.
wine or jewelry or whatever. Is there a way to protect? How do you
Yeah.
protect?
Look, it's hard now because it's actually it's not hard. So probably there's a couple of things there. So to set up one of those family protection trusts is good. So there's two ways of doing it. One, you can gift those assets over into the trust. So going down the track in the future, you'll just buy through the trust because then it's not your stuff anymore. So if some crazy says I'm going to sue Michael Simms, you go, well, I don't care because my stuff's in there. But you've got this valuable stuff that you found. It's like the trash and treasure virtually. So you can go around for the stuff you've got outside. The issue there is you could probably gift it over into the trust. With capital gains tax, it may well be that it's a collectible, so it's not, capital gains tax is probably not a huge issue. So have a chat with Mary Jane around that one. But if you can gift it over, that's a much better idea for that. And like, so people who've got large amounts of cash and bonds and stuff like that, they should, because there's no capital gains tax, they should be, transferring that over into a family protection trust where you're going to be effectively A-OK. One thing, if you go down the track, here's another one you can do is yeah, definitely that. The other one is if you've got a lot of wealth and you're not going to transfer the asset over. So we use another strategy. So this is quite often what we do for family homes where they build up a bit of equity. What we do is we take that equity. So we work out what the net value of the home is after loans, and then we transfer that. We don't transfer the equity, we use a promissory note, and then we lend it back so that we're shifting the value without capital gains tax and stamp duty into another vehicle, the family protection trust, so that if you get sued, effectively that wealth is protected. And that's something that you can do for your collections as well. But good on you. My wife's like that too. She loves getting out and going out and finding, but she's probably a bit different from you. She goes and looks for the handbags and vintage stuff. So, but there's a lot of money there, and people do, they throw it out.
Mm. And it's hard to sell. Well, sometimes it can be easy, and you can be right place
Yeah.
at right time. What you're
Yeah.
going to get in return for it.
Yeah, but if you do well, like some of those, particularly over in America, some of those baseball cards, you
Yeah.
find the right one, it's like absolutely worth a fortune.
Well, that'll bring me to my father. My father died 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Now he has a lot of that kind of stuff, baseball
Yeah.
memorabilia. Again, we don't know what to do with it, but a lot of things came up then that we've never dealt with death before.
Yeah.
Like my family,
Yeah.
we didn't actually get a lawyer or an attorney. We
Yeah.
he just died. Now we don't even know if he had digital accounts,
Yeah.
accounts, crypto. I doubt it, but
Yeah.
could have had all this that we don't know about and we've missed. My mum recently tried to sell her house and cannot sell it because my dad's name is still on
Oh no,
it.
really? Oh, so yeah, because yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing is you go back and it's a really good point that you raised earlier, and I think that you're a case in history, which is fantastic, is that um people don't do wills, and then so what you've got to do is you die and test it, but you've still got to go to court. I mean, it doesn't matter which way you're going, you go to court. So it's better to go in and then make that transition very easy. So, like if I was drafting up your will, because assuming there's no fights for that, it's a very simple process. So I'd be saying, well, the money goes to the house goes to your mum, and then the memorabilia can go to you. But I'd probably say, well, if it's going to go to you, it should go into a trust for you. And likewise, the next one that you really need to look at, Michael, is when your mum passes away with your kids. Again, you don't want to be taking that money from your mum's property and your dad's property and giving it to everyone, because if it is, it could get wasted. Or I've seen instances where people have been married and they've just been hanging on, hanging on, hanging on, and then when dad or mum dies, bang, the divorce papers come out. So again, in your will, it should actually make sure that those monies all go into a trust to protect each of the children.
Yeah. And what about if you have secret money? Do you include that in a trust or?
Yeah, if you want. So what sort of secret are you looking at doing?
I'm just saying you've got 100 grand cash under your bed, or
Yeah,
you have crypto that even your wife doesn't know about, or no one knows about because you're just doing it on the side. And you didn't want to get in trouble for buying it. Now it's worth
yeah,
a
it's
lot.
gone up. Yeah,
Right,
I know.
right,
Yeah,
right.
we have a lot of um yeah, we have a lot. I was the first person actually in the world, this is going back a while ago, to build a crypto protection trust, like a family protection trust, but for crypto, because in those days with trust, which is, as I said, is protection for it, it was impossible to go to a coin exchange or a crypto exchange and say that the asset was in a trust because no one really understood it. And so what we did there is we said, look, the the asset that we bought effectively was really in the name of the trust. So there's definitely ways around that sort of stuff. You just got to look, if you got that stuff, you just got to be really careful these days because the government virtually has got tabs on them. If you got cash, it's like, well, instantly, you're a drug dealer. Well, it's not the case at all. Some people lie. Some people don't trust banks. Some people don't, trust the system. And cash is still a really important tool in our economy. And God forbid the day that we get rid of cash, it's all digital. And then suddenly you find that the internet goes down, there's a Carrington event or something, then what's everyone going to do? They're all going to take up their digital pitchforks and start killing each other. So,
Yeah, that's why I just think, again, when my dad died, we didn't find a lot,
yeah,
but we found random $100 notes that
yeah,
he'd just hidden in DVD cases or
oh,
books.
absolutely.
You know what I mean? Now, me and my mum, well, my mum just had them,
Yeah.
but if you do, if someone is to go and find money in
Mm.
a family member
Well,
that,
if it's come from a family and it's on death, absolutely, you can do whatever you want with it because it's just passed from one generation to another.
would you have to
Now,
tell, is it, well, no one's going to find out, but do
yeah,
you legally have to go and tell everybody else?
no, not at all. So, yeah, I mean that's to give you an idea, to give you an idea, and there's some good and bad things. So we can sort of stretch the. It's a bit harder to do now, and I've seen a few people trying to do systems that really don't work. But going back 80s, 90s, 2000s, people would have companies or whatever in Vanuatu or tax havens or whatever, Hong Kong. I had companies in Hong Kong as well, and you try to hide money through there or offshore money and all that sort of stuff. And it was very hard to work because in 2000 they actually introduced the first unrealized gains tax on offshore companies. If you're going to come in, make a lot of money or a lot of ideas, I always tell people, well, I'll set it up for you because I've had a lot of guys with a lot of crypto who've done really well. But I say, look, the last place you want to be is in Australia. So you want to make sure that you go offshore by the time you realise it, because otherwise the tax office has got it's got database on absolutely everything these days. And the problem is with AI coming in, they're already built for AI tools. At some point in time, you just have to assume you're going to get audited. So if you find that sort of stuff, the cash around, then go and spend it, put it back in the economy and make the economy better. But crypto is probably a bit different because crypto's, because if it's in a cold wallet, I mean that's it's a completely different thing. So if you don't tell me and I don't tell you, then it's hard because no one can prove it.
But do you need password? This is what I wonder too.
Yeah.
I have a PayPal account. Most people have a PayPal account.
Yeah. So
Money in
yeah,
it.
in our will, actually, because I've always been forward thinking on this one. So around about probably about 6 or 7 years ago, when we devised the will, actually put in there a digital will. So inside you've got your normal will, which is my collection's going here, my cash is going here, and then there's the next one, which is your crypto, your Facebook, all of that sort of stuff. So who's going to look after that? Now your digital executor, the person who's going to look after it, may well be different to the other person because you want to have someone who's pretty savvy as well. And then you can then say, okay, these digital assets, they had to go there. I've even taken it a little bit further now because I knew with AI, it's very easy to clone people. And, if you look at it now, it's very easy. If you can imagine what it's going to be like in 5 or 10 years. So I actually build, not many people have used it, but I've built into my will that my likeness, my digital likeness, can go down to my family, my bloodline. Because say someone's famous like Michael Simms, it goes down there because then that will prevent someone, coming and replicating it. And it's quite funny over in Denmark, only 2 weeks ago, your digital persona, your look, your feel, your voice is now covered by copyright. And I think that that's a good thing for all of us because really I want to know that I'm dealing with Michael not a clone of Michael, if that makes sense.
Mm. Now, I don't know if you got a microphone, but your volume just went down slightly.
Oh, sorry, is that a bit better or might
That's
have
better.
been, yeah, okay, cool.
I
Yeah,
wasn't going to say.
I'm getting
Now,
too excited with the likeness.
with the will,
Yeah,
at first you kind of, well, again, my understanding,
yeah,
at first you were like, the will kind of doesn't matter. No one follows the will anyway. It can be
yeah.
sued. Now you just mentioned you putting stuff in your will. So
Yeah,
how
absolutely.
important is the will?
I think all of us should have a plan A and a plan B. So, plan A is trust, self-managed super funds, and all that. If the will is second place, if there's a challenge to the will. So it depends on the state. So if you've got no seconds, prior spouses, you're getting on well with the kids and all that, then the will's fine. But if you're in a blended marriage, you've got stepchildren, blah, 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 where you know it's going to get challenged, then that's a completely different scenario. So you need to ensure that you've got a plan A, which is shifting the wealth and shifting other assets into a multi-generational family protection trust or alternatively into superannuation. So the will is important for, you know, for the base case. I'm sure you're probably going to be the same, and the same. Your dad would have been good if he'd had a will. But if you know there's a challenge, then you've got to move to a completely different paradigm.
Yeah, my dad actually did a will, and it was pretty much done 2 days after he married my mum.
Yep.
So done 40 odd years
Oh
ago
wow, yeah.
when he
So you
had
didn't
no
even cater for your kids. Yeah, so that's another one that's really important is that you should really update your will or go through the process because things change. I mean, there's even cases that what they're doing now is pretty radical. Is there's been a few cases like particularly around farms. So typically, in fact, I dealt with a couple of farms today. Is that usually with a farm there's one child that works on the farm and they work bloody hard, so dad wants to, you know, give that child the farm because, they've worked on it for such a long time. One of the things now they're using a legal tool called promissory estoppel. That is, you've made a promise, and then you've got to keep to that promise. So there's been instances where, oh, one kid's worked on the farm all the time. Another one comes in and says, oh, no, dad said that the farm is going to be split 50-50. And as soon as you do that, it ends up like 4 or 5 years of litigation. And that's another case because lawyers are very crafty about getting.
simple question. It kind of relates to that. Now, how do I know that my dad didn't do a will in the last 40 years? How do I know
Yeah.
if he did or he didn't?
Yeah, well, normally that's a really good, actually, that's an excellent point. So if you go through the process, let's say when your dad dies, so normally what happens, dad dies, you go to, there's a funeral. The funeral director gives you your death certificate. So that's like, it used to be like, if it's a dodgy death, then it's the coroner, but the funeral director gives you your death certificate. From that, you usually go to a lawyer, and a lawyer will go and get what they call probate. So what has to happen first, and this is the scary thing, they advertise on the Supreme Court website that Fred Simms has passed away, and anyone who wants to make a claim on the estate or contest the will can do so. And then, look, that happened with me when my dad died. I got all these things, all these dodgy lawyers in Adelaide were saying, "Oh, we looked after your dad for a long time." I'm going, "Well, fuck, I know you didn't do that." So, but anyway, what happens from there is then you go to the Supreme Court. The lawyer will go and they'll say, "This is the last will." But then you're right, Michael. Someone might pop up and say, "Oh, I don't think so. I think Michael's on the wrong one. Here's one that he did 3 weeks ago, and given everything to his 26-year-old mistress." So, and that happens all the time. So it's funny. And then what you do is then the kids can say, "Well, hold on, that will was made under duress or threats or stuff like that." But you're right. If there's no one contesting it and that's the only will you've got, then essentially you go with that. one of the other ones you'll find, this was an interesting one, was I had it's really important to work out who's going to be the executor, who's going to manage. But I had these two sisters. I had one sister coming to me. They had the will, and Dad made them the executors, which are the people who look after the distribution of the estate. And they were both fighting with each other, and they wanted to get rid of each other as executors. I mean, they hadn't been appointed yet, and they wanted to fight. So you can imagine what was going to happen. Anyway, um, I was having a chat with this lady, and we ended up not taking the case because I'm not interested in that shit. But I said, "Oh yeah, my dad had dementia, and that's a horrible disease. He got it around about 2018. He noticed it, and then she said, "Oh yeah, my dad did too. It was around about." I said, "What year was that? 2017." I said, "Really? He was diagnosed?" I said, "Yeah, ACAT came out and diagnosed." I said, "But hold on, I've got you're fighting over a will that your lawyer signed off on in 2020. How is that possible? Because your dad, if he's got dementia, he's got no mental capacity." And again, so that was, to me, it was like a fraudulent will. So you can actually put that aside.
Now, with the trust, who actually controls the trust?
Well, so when I have a look at a trust, so if I looked at a box like this, you got the beneficiaries. And so we want to make sure that's only a bloodline, which is a good thing. And there's the trustee. So the trustee is the person who makes the investments, does the accounts, manages, if there's a business in there, manages the business. So they're the decision making. And what came about is that maybe 500 or 600 years ago, people would have a trustee, and they'd be assigned, we're talking about medieval times. So someone would be off, Michael's off fighting the crusade, over against the Spanish and all that sort of stuff. And he leaves his brother as the trustee. But when he comes back from the crusade, so he actually lived, then he says to his brother, "Oh, look, I want to get rid of you as trustee." And the brother says, "Well, no, that's not going to happen." So what happened there is we put in place what we call the appointor. So the appointor is the person behind the trustee who says, "Well, I don't like you anymore. You can go," or "You're to be excluded as a beneficiary." So that's why I call them the kings and the queens of the trust. It's like, well, yeah, you're okay. You can be the trustee, but bang, you're gone within a second if you want.
And you write that up in
Yeah,
your.
you write it in the thing, but then that's where the important thing is, because that's where you need to have that line of succession. So it's you, like it'd be classic one would have been like your dad if he had a trust. Then it goes down to you, probably skips out your mum, it goes dad and goes to the next generation. And then if it's long-term trust, if there's a lot of money in there, it then goes down to the next. So the classic one is like the Murdochs at the moment. So which was a really interesting case because he put a lot of his News Corp shares into a trust for his children, and that was for tax purposes. Anyway, lo and behold, two of his kids end up being left-wing kids. So he's got four children, two are left-wing, and then you've got Lachlan, who's right-wing and likes Fox News and that. And he tried to go and change because when he passes away, the kids end up getting it. And he's like scared to death that the other two are going to gang up and then actually make Fox News like a left-wing news outfit. So anyway, but it's funny when you start dealing with families. The other one was like Lang Hancock, who had huge amounts of royalties over in, he's a very famous iron ore baron, probably a bit of a robber baron. He set up a trust for his grandchildren. But, and this is an interesting one, he made his daughter Gina Reinhardt the trustee and the appointor. And the problem about that is because none of the beneficiaries have any right or entitlement, she just said, "Okay, whoever's going to look after me, I'll look after them." And so the two of the kids have been fighting with her for like 20 years now to try and get some entitlement. But that again shows that even these kids, even though they are named beneficiaries, they can't really do anything.
Yeah. So you on the
It's
one hand,
fascinating.
you rich people doing that, and the murders happening, and the murder.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
the movies. But on the other end, I know people that are in the system in the government,
Yeah.
and the government is now the trustee.
Yeah, no, you don't want that. Like the public trustee, like
Mm.
it's terrible. So yeah, no. Look, all you have to do is just go ABC Four Corners, go public trustee, and that's another good scam for you because I see a lot of people that come to me and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I got the public trustee did a free will for me." I said, "It's not free. That's probably the most costly thing you've ever done in your life." Like I've seen normally what will happen is, let's say your dad's got a parcel of shares, then what normally would happen is if you're the executor, you transfer the shares over to your name, but usually you don't because you just want to get rid of them and say, okay, well, the shares, we're going to sell them and off and running. Public trustee doesn't do that. They transfer them over. And there was this one case that I saw at Four Corners. There was 20 shares that they transferred over, and Mary Jane's and the guys at FFS would hardly charge anything for it. They charged $28,000 to change a registry from one to the public trustee. So it's a giant rip-off. It's terrible.
Yeah. See, a lot
So
of
if
the
anyone's got a public trustee will, you've got to get rid of that straight away.
yeah, a lot of the disabled people end up
Oh yeah.
for whatever reason, parents die and there's no one else to care. And one I dealt with, I was fighting with them to get $30, $40 for a haircut.
Yeah. Oh,
Uh,
yeah, it's terrible. I know. It's disgusting. I know. And,
so
and that's why I think I'm a, so I always like to think that I'm a kind person, and that's why I I fight hard in building structures to protect families, to prevent, because if I can prevent the litigation, because it's not, because it's the very nature of the Western law, the system we're in is adversarial, which means one lawyer has to fight with another lawyer. That's what Jimmy. It's like Mortal Kombat. So by the very nature, the lawyer's going to come in and say, "Well, you've been hard done by. You're going to get 90% of the estate. I guarantee it." But they'll never guarantee it in writing, of course. And then they'll fight, and it's sad. And then you see, as you said, where the public trustee becomes the guardian of someone, and they just don't give them any money, and they take all these fees. It's sad because it's not right as a human being.
same topic, similar. Super. You mentioned earlier,
Yeah,
whoever I write down who I want the super to go to, it
yeah,
goes to there's no fight, no court battle.
yeah.
Now,
So there's two things. So um, you can pay to a dependent. So dependent is a spouse. So whoever's de facto your spouse. So get it. The second one is your children. So your children can get it as well. Um, Third one is a financial dependent. So, for example, if you're looking after a stepchild or you're looking after your brother or someone and the stepchild, then you can pay it directly down there. Otherwise, it has to go to your legal representative, which is your executor in your estate.
they
So
can't
that's the
give some
point.
to a friend or something like that. Can't.
No, oh, you can, but it has to go through the estate and then down to your friend. So you can't do it directly. But again, if it goes in the estate, then we know there's potential. People going, well, oh, that's a good one, Sims. I'm not going to do that one. I'm your kid. Bugger your friend. I'm going to come and take the money, if that makes sense. But it also means that for the other one is that, if you want to give money to this child and not the other child, it's not going to be challenged. Whereas I see some people say, oh, I'm going to leave it equally to the kids. And then what happens though is it's the reverse because each of the children then have to prove to the court who's the most needy. So the court does a needs test and says, oh, hold on, it's all equal. No, you deserve a lot more because you're a financial. And I saw one, for example, it was in Victoria, it was a $2 million estate. 62-year-old, mum and dad died, 62-year-old, been a drug addict, stolen from mum and dad, the whole life, always taking money and all that. So the parents wrote him out of the will. He ended up getting $500,000. Now, the court actually did the right thing because they said, well, we're not going to give it to you directly. They put it into a trust for him to, so he wasn't going to waste it. But yeah, so
So
it's
you can put
interesting.
super into a trust as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's actually laws, believe it or not. You can, and this is what I always do. You can do a will, an SMSF will, I call them. So that's like a binding direction on the trustees. and that can go directly straight into a trust, again, for protection. So you're doing well, Michael. You're learning really quickly. Good on
Try.
you. I'm going to
Yeah.
give you 9 out of 10.
I had some questions, but now more are coming to me as you speak. Like
Yeah.
again, my son.
You're starting to get the theme is trust, protection. I don't own it. No one can take it from me.
So my son's disabled, and a lot of my
Okay.
viewers have disabled
Oh
children.
yeah, no, I heard. Yeah, so I heard he's got
Yeah,
autism. Is
he's
that correct?
autistic. Now he
Yeah. So
can't.
what levels has been diagnosed at?
They didn't give levels when he was diagnosed, but he'll need 24-hour care all of his
Okay,
life.
so he's a
But
three.
he's happy.
Yep.
um,
So
but
is he? How old's he?
he's now 15, almost 16.
Okay, so when he gets 18, so this is a really good thing. So when he turns 18, he'll get a special disability pension. So that's quite good, healthcare, all that sort of stuff. Of course, he's going to get NDIS, and you'll be getting NDIS anyway at the moment. What happens with the like Centrelink, age pension, everything's means tested. So if a grandparent or someone like let's say your mum said, okay, when I pass away, I want $200,000 for him. If you gave him that $200,000 directly, then effectively that's going to impact his special disability pension because he's got $200,000 of assets now. But you can take that money, you can actually put it into what we call a special disability trust. So it's got to have some certain terms and conditions. It has a trustee. The benefits are going to be for him. When he passes away, it can be, willed out and stuff like that. But he can have you can put a house in there, and the house is excluded from the assets test, and you can have up to $800,000 of assets in there for him, and that's also excluded from the assets test. So he can have quite a lot of money there that's put in by his family and still get the full pension, which is important.
How
Now
do I
he's
make
got,
sure?
sorry,
How do I make sure someone else doesn't spend that money?
easy. Make sure that you're the trustee and the appointor. Remember, they're the two. They're the
Yeah.
two.
What,
But
what if I'm dead?
then
What if I'm dead?
remember, now you're learning what's your succession plan, who's going to come in. And what you can do is, we've introduced for a lot of this because that is an issue for family members, is you can have someone who's a guardian of the trust. So although you might put your brother or your sister or whatever in there, you still have someone else like a Mary Jane or whatever, who comes in and sits and says, okay, well, let's see the decisions you're making. Let's check the finances and all that stuff. What investments you're going to have. And
Perfect.
the other
Yeah.
one that people don't realize is also, um, you can put assets in there, like if you've got shares or crypto or whatever, where normally you'd have capital gains tax for it. You can put that into the trust, and there's no capital gains tax on it. So there's a lot of incentives to set up special disability trusts. So that's something definitely you want to,
That summed it up good for
yeah,
me.
it's something you really,
I put my super in my mum's name,
yeah,
but only not for her to go and buy a new car, but for her
yeah,
to look after my son or,
yeah,
give
perfect. Yeah,
him
well,
that
see, the
week
special
of fun.
disability trust it's got, it's much better than anything else, and it's got all these advantages, and again, it's to look after. So special disability trusts were well and truly before NDIS, when family members would put money in to make sure that the children were looked after. Now we've got NDIS, it's sort of like a bit of an anachronism, but they're still really important going down the track. Because there's nothing, and as I said, I deal with um, clients all the time, and it's one of the biggest worries I find with parents who've got disabled children is who's going to look after my child when I pass away. And it's quite interesting if you also have a look. It's quite common, maybe not with your son, but certainly people who've got autism level 1 or 2, is they've also got ADHD. So you're now finding there's a lot of common, so they've got 2 or 3 things that are happening at the same time. One is that they're usually, I've only ever seen one, but they're usually hopeless at money, easily scammed, because they tend to believe people really well. So unless they're financial savant, then that's a bit different.
Yeah, my son's at the level where he just knows you get a card and you tap it on a machine.
Yeah, that's dangerous. And
Doesn't
yeah,
know where money comes from, where it goes, or how much anything is.
yeah. Then he gets a
Um,
girlfriend and she says, "Oh, tap dad's card on the machine."
Now, business. If you have a business, I know
Yep.
when you die, you're dead. It doesn't matter. But you've got a business, you're running a business,
Yeah.
and what happens to your business?
Well, the first thing you've got to protect it. So your shares. So I always set up a company because that gives you at least one bit of protection. But you don't want to have shares in your own name because again, that's a target on your back. As your business is your income earning home. So you want to have those shares in that family protection trust that I was talking about because that'll protect you as well. If you go down even the next level and you come up like, for example, like myself, if you come up with a few ideas and that, you might have your crown jewels like any IP or intellectual property you've got in a separate trust and then license it back. But the big one that most people, there's over 3 million companies in Australia. The first thing you've got to have is a lot of those are sole director. So you've got to have a successor director. So it's the same. Remember that line of succession? So whoever's going to come in as your next appointer in the trust or your next executor or whatever, you got to have someone who's next who's going to come in and look after that company straight away because if that company's there, who's going to pay the staff? If there's no one to pay the staff or pay the suppliers, that company is going to go downhill straight away, and then that asset for your family's gone. So, if you're smart, like if you and I were in business and we had a company, first thing you do is you have a shareholders agreement. So that if you die, I have an option to buy your shares at a certain price, but I get a life insurance policy on it on your death so that way I can pay out your family and then you do the same with me. So that's a fairly common practice. So again, once you go down and what we're doing, and I think I got this from my dad who was a general insurance guy, is you always look for the worst, plan for it, because then at the end, if it doesn't get to that stage, at least you got that weight off your shoulder.
Mm. Now, you mentioned SMSF, it's behind your
Yep.
head. You mentioned it numerous times. You wanted to just briefly, what
Yeah,
is
so
that and how does it all merge with this?
Yeah, no, that's a really good one. It comes under the umbrella. So in Australia since '92, we've had the super guarantee where the government now, oh, sorry, most people don't realise that up to 12%, if you're working for salary and wages, 12% of your salary and wages gets put into super. And it's very smart because Paul Keating instigated that one because he could see that the unions were losing their power, but now they've got huge financial power because most people who put their money into union-run funds, whether it's CBUS, Australian Super, or whatever, and so from that, way back in 1994, they gave the option of setting up your own self-managed super fund. So that means a family can get together. You can have up to 6 members, and you can take your money from a retail fund, aggregate it. I know a lot of people who are investing in crypto through their super and done very well. A lot of people, I know with Mary Jane and that, they put gold in there and they've done really well as well. A lot of people, as I said, they've gone into super. And again, it's pretty good. You can borrow money to buy property in super, and you can borrow up to 80%. So you negatively gear inside your superannuation fund, which makes sense because if you think about it, like a lot of people invest in property outside to get that rental income to replace their salary when they retire, which is great. But that rental income still is going to be taxable. Whereas if you did exactly the same thing inside your self-managed super fund, once you turn 65, that money coming out of your fund is tax-free. So you're miles in front of everyone else. And if you sold the property inside your fund, it's tax-free. Sell it outside, you're up for capital gains tax. So it's almost like, well, same deal, but you can't borrow, you can't invest in crypto, you can't invest in gold through retail funds, but you can through your own family super funds. So yeah,
All right. We
it's the
have
way to go.
10 minutes left. What's the first thing people should do? Just if they're like me, they've done none of this.
Yeah.
What's
Um,
tomorrow?
the, the, fir-
No.
the first thing that I would do, probably I've got quite a lot of videos. The book, it's going into the first edition was sold out. But if you go onto Kindle and go to Grant Abbott Family Wealth Protection, I know Kindle's not the best, but you can do that. It's only like $4. It's not probably going to be the best $4 you ever had in your life. And there's lots on SMSFs and lots on family wealth protection, and you're going to get your aha moment. And once you get that, you go, I understand now. So if you read that, and I've had people devour it in a night, just read it and learn, and then you'll understand what the game's about. And then when you, it's like any game, when you understand that you're protecting wealth for your bloodline, you're taking that responsibility. Because a lot of people just walk around like your dad,
Mm.
you don't know what you don't know, Oh yeah, if I came to you and said, okay, well, good on you getting Michael Jordan, how do I know that card is or
Yeah,
that
I
jersey is good or
assume the
whatever?
person who stole it probably gave it away or sold it for
Exactly.
$100. You know?
Exactly. I know. So I think if you read the book, I've got if you go to my YouTube at Grant Abbott, there's heaps of videos there for you. A good one is to if you go into my website, so that's grantabbott.com. And you'll see in there, there's like you can just sign up for a newsletter. I put out blogs all the time. Um, you can access, I think, so with my latest book, I was going to do an Audible book, but I thought I'd bugger that. So I'm actually releasing different tracks all the time. So I'm up to about chapter 3. So I find it a lot easier to readings my mind probably like yours races too much to sit down and read. So but I'm happy to sit, put the earphones on and listen. So I've got about 2 or 3 chapters up there and they'll keep on going. So that's really good. And I've got a new book coming out which is turbocharging your super, because a lot of my books before on self-managed have been a bit highbrow, like really technical stuff. So this one I've just kept it simple and put a lot of my strategies there. So the first a few chapters there. So if you sign up there, there's no cost, and I'll just keep on releasing stuff out for you.
Yeah, no,
It's better
sounds.
again, the best to learn because this is sort of. Do you mean look? I spend a lot of time learning myself, and I'll listen to spiritual people or learn how to manifest or whatever. Because what goes in here is really important because the government and like the media, they put all this claptrap in there because what happens is they're effectively programming you. So you got to deprogram or defrag yourself and get some good stuff in there and rechange yourself.
Yeah, we've just touched on the edges, I assume. I assume.
Yeah,
For me, it was a bit like a campfire chat, a
yeah,
couple of drinks, and it was just every time you were saying something, I was thinking, oh, well, that, because
yeah,
I
yeah.
really have.
So normally what happens is I work with people like Mary Jane and quite often, I do seminars with them or stuff like that, and you can just give her a call and send in like all your information, and then happy to do I'm booked out a little bit, but if you're happy to wait for a little while, I can. We get together and I get all your information, and then I go through all this in more detail, show the graphics, and say, okay, well, Michael, this is what we need to do for you. This is what we need to do for you. We videotape it so it becomes a bit more personal for you.
Yeah,
And there's no
beautiful.
cost on that one, so that's even better.
Well, thank you, Grant. It was lovely having you on. It was a bit
Pleasure.
different to what I normally do, but I think
Yeah, no, well done for you. Anyway, being a dad of a autistic son, it's very, very difficult at the best of times, and it can be a gift, but it can also be a big challenge. I know, and it's something that you'll be there, basically for the rest of your life. So, well done for you.
and that this, or as I said, I haven't thought about it much. I haven't thought of all the little things we brought up, but I've always thought about what's going to happen when
Yeah,
I die,
absolutely.
when his
Yeah,
mum dies.
yeah,
Our
exactly.
parents are both will be dead.
Or what happens if you become incapacitated?
Mm,
That's probably the bigger one. What happens if you're a car accident or you know you're incapacitated and the first thing is not so much yourself. It's going to be, oh my God, what's going to happen to him?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank
Good
you,
luck,
Grant.
buddy. We can get you fixed up. Let's get you a special disability trust. So we'll sort you out.
Beautiful.
Well,
All right.
lovely meeting you.
You too.
Yeah,
I'll
behave
hopefully
yourself.
we'll do this again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't wait to see your collection. It's
I'll
good.
take some shoes. I'll bring some. No.
Cool.
All
Okay,
right.
guys.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for listening and contact Grant. We should say your website one more time.
Yeah, grantabbott.com. That's pretty easy. Grantabbott.com. And if you go to YouTube, just go at Grant Abbott, and there's heaps of free resources there.
Great. Beautiful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.